After you have dealt with the first three types of subjunctive use, which are verbs of influence, verbs of emotion, and verbs of doubt or denial, then we get into what seems to be the stickier parts of the subjunctive. First up, adjective clauses. So the question that you face when you're trying to decide if a sentence needs to have a subjunctive clause in it is sometimes easy to decipher and sometimes not. The very first thing is when you have a verb that expresses an attempt to influence somebody else's behavior. When I say, I want that you study, which in English we would typically say, I want you to study. I request that you bring me a pizza, something along those lines. Whether those sentences are positive or negative, you're going to use the subjunctive in the second clause, because when I ask you to do something, that doesn't mean you're going to do it. And so we essentially have a little bit of doubt that the second verb will come to fruition. Then with the expressions of emotion, we have a slightly different situation, because if I say I'm happy that it's snowing or I am not happy that it's snowing, we use the subjunctive in the second clause because at that point I am expressing my understanding that other people are happy. If I'm not a skier and I'm trying to drive a long way, I might be unhappy that it's snowing. But if skier who sees snow falling and knows that up in the mountains where they're headed, there's a lot of snow, are going to be happy. So by acknowledging that someone else's opinion might be different from mine, I do so with the subjunctive in the second clause. When we get to expressions of doubt and denial, we have some, like dudar, that show some possibility of something occurring. And then we have negar, which shows that the event that is described in the second clause has no chance at all of happening. Those are balanced by the expressions of 100% belief, like creo que, or no niego que, or no dudo que, which show that you believe the expression in the second clause is going to occur or has occurred already. And in those circumstances, we use the indicative. So if you deny something as well, if you say, I deny that Santa Claus exists, it doesn't matter how firm you are. What matters is that you're saying there's a 0% chance that Santa Claus exists. If you say, I absolutely believe that the sky is orange, then you still use the indicative, because whether or not you're right, it's what you are claiming to believe. Then we get into our next category of expressions. We have dealt with relative clauses before, where you say something like, my father, comma, who lives in Indiana, comma, is 88 years old. But when you have a slightly different clause, like I need a car that is newer than 2015, then you look at that clause as a descriptive clause, an adjective clause, referring back to the noun right before it. So I'm going to switch over to a PowerPoint and talk my way through that for you. So nice and minimalist on the design this time. Los antecedentes. An antecedente is a noun. Be careful. Yes, I should mention. You need to be careful with these because it's not going to be quite as obvious to you that you're in a situation where you might need the subjunctive. You'll have to remember this as a completely distinct scenario for using the subjunctive. An antecedent antecedes. So that right there is clear as mud, isn't it? But this is what it does. And if you know enough Latin, ante and seed, you can figure it out. So the antecedent comes before a clause, all right? What does that mean to you and to anyone who's looking at the sentence? Well, it means the following. An antecedent is a noun right before a clause that describes it. For example, the house that I bought is red, describes the house. And how do we react when we come across one of these antecedents, when there's a clause after it that describes it? First of all, you have to know if the noun that you're describing exists. If it does, you're going to use an indicative statement to describe it. But if it's possible or completely impossible that the noun that you're describing exists, then the clause will be in the subjunctive. Essentially, this situation with the noun plus a clause falls under the same category as the doubt and denial verbs. So you're saying it ain't happening. And if it's not happening, you use the subjunctive. If it may happen, you use the subjunctive. If for sure you know the noun exists, then you're going to use the indicative. So here we go. I'm going to give you 5 scenarios. Por ejemplo, I had a cat that weighed 25 pounds. I like to work with students who study and also with students who don't. It's always fun. I'm hoping to hear news that I'm waiting for. I'd like to find a pizzeria that has anchovies or serves anchovies. And I need a car that gets 700 miles per gallon. So these 5 scenarios, we're going to talk about them now. Okay. I had a cat that weighed 25 pounds. The cat is the antecedent. The clause that describes the cat is that weighed 25 pounds. Now in English, we won't have a different mood. We won't use subjunctive versus indicative under these circumstances. But in Spanish, you have to decide now if the clause that describes the cat is going to be indicative or subjunctive. So let's look at what I decided to write. Tuve un gato que pesaba 25 libras. I decided to put it in the imperfect, which is an indicative tense. And why did I put it in the imperfect? Well, here's the cat. This is Pangerban. He was an absolutely adorable part Maine Coon. Oh, what a great boy he was, so loving. And that's my proof that he exists. So I have to use an indicative here to describe the gato who is existing. Here's another example. I like to work with students who study. Okay, students will be your antecedent. You have a clause who study that describes them. Now the question is there such a creature? Are there students who study? Me gusta trabajar con estudiantes que estudian. Okay. I use the indicative here, present indicative, because I'm saying that there are students who study. And here's the proof. I'm not teaching these people, but it's a nice stock photo to illustrate that there are students who study. All right. The next one, por ejemplo, I'm hoping to hear news that is good. News is the antecedent, and there may be good news, and there may not be good news. It all depends on the circumstances, doesn't it? Well, espero escuchar noticias que sean buenas. There might be a day or even a stretch of time when there's a virus and we're all in lockdown where the news seems not to be very good. So I may not be 100% sure that there is good news, but I'm not going to deny the possibility. It could be some. So here's a woman who is reading the paper, and is she going to find good news? Well, maybe. And because there's some doubt that she'll find good news, we're going to use the subjunctive, bam, right there, to describe the antecedent noticias. Another option, por ejemplo, I seek a pizzeria that serves anchovies. Am I sure that there's a restaurant in the area that will put anchovies on my pizza? Let's see. Busco una pizzeria que sirva anchoas. I'm saying I haven't found one yet. Not going to guarantee that there is none. Look at this place. Here's a nice big table and some pizzas. Good restaurant, sandwiches, donuts. But do they have anchovies? Maybe. So I use the subjunctive to describe the pizzeria that may or may not exist serving anchovies. And this one, por ejemplo, I need a car that gets 700 miles per gallon. So what we have to decide is there any such creature as we're thinking about this? So I need a car that gets 700 miles per gallon. Necesito un coche que consiga 700 millas por galón. Okay, I'm saying that it is not only doubtful that a car will get 700 miles per gallon, this coche that I'm describing, but given the current sticker on these things, look at this. This car gets 26 miles per gallon. You know, it's a far, far cry to go from 26 to 700. If you have an all-electric car, you would calculate it differently, the mileage differently, because there is no gasoline involved. But with a hybrid, you're not going to get anywhere near 700. So I'm saying this vehicle does not exist. Nope. And so I use the subjunctive because I'm denying its existence. Okay? So when you face a two-clause sentence where one of the clauses is an adjective clause that describes the noun, that is the direct object of the sentence primarily, then you are going to say the following in order to sort out whether you need the indicative or the subjunctive. How do we test for it? You ask yourself this: does the noun exist? All right. And in order to get at that information, if you're looking for a way to see if it's logical to come up with the name of a place, it could be, you'll use the indicative. And here's what you ask: ¿Dónde está? If I say, where is your 25-pound cat? I will unfortunately have to say he is in the bag where we have his ashes. And if I can say that, then he existed, and the noun should be, the verb should be in the indicative. If I say, where are the students who study? You say, oh, well, they are in the lab or in the library working on their next section of their course. Then you would use the indicative for that one. If I say to myself, where am I getting the good news, which is intangible, but you can kind of say, well, it's in the paper, it's on the TV. I say, I'm not even sure if anybody's reporting any good news right now. Then you have some doubt, you're going to use a subjunctive. If I say, oh man, where's the pizzeria I go to get anchovies on my pizza? And if you have to say, I haven't found one yet, so I'm not so sure, then you're going to use the subjunctive in the descriptive clause, the adjective clause. And then at the last one, I need a car that has 700 miles per gallon. If you can say there ain't no such thing, definitely a subjunctive. So that's what you do, because if it's illogical to say it exists, to name a place where you can find it, you're not going to use the indicative at all. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we figure out the adjective clause situation. There's not much to the actual concept, but what we have an issue with is remembering to look at the noun to see if it exists before we describe it. With the case of a standard two-clause sentence, I demand that you sell me your car. You can look at the first verb and know you need a subjunctive. But when you get farther into a sentence with these nouns that are triggering the subjunctive because they don't exist or may not exist, then it's harder to remember that. But you're going to need to make use of these clauses from now on for the rest of your Spanish-speaking life. Okay. So that's it for the moment. These are the adjective clauses. The next one we're going to get into is going to be more of a challenge. We'll talk about that next time. Okay. Bueno, hasta pronto. Quiero que sigan estudiando y nos vemos pronto.